We have a thumbs up. Good morning, everybody. There, that's noise. I'm Marcel James. I have worked with Antelope Audio for 13 years, and over the last few months have transitioned to working more full-time as a mastering engineer, something I've been doing for over a decade when I lived in Los Angeles. And now I'm still affiliated with Antelope and doing some work with them and supporting some of the local dealers. I do live here in Germany, and I'd like to say something quickly in German, if you don't mind. Wenn jemand eine Frage hat wegen Mastering oder Antelope, ich bin hier gerne zum Helfen und habe ein Businesskarte dabei und Sie können mich jederzeit ein E-Mail schicken oder anrufen. Ich wohne in Mainz und habe mein Tonstudio hier in Deutschland. So, ich würde das nur schnell auf Deutsch sagen. Wenn jemand eine Frage oder irgendwas nicht versteht auf Englisch, dann versuche ich mit meinem kleines Deutsch zu erklären. So, thank you for that moment. So Antelope Audio, I want to go over very quickly some of the history, then we'll get right into the effects part of it, which is really why we're here, to take a look at how I use these effects actually every day in the mastering work that I do. Quickly about myself, I sort of started out doing EDM music. I did stuff for Armada and Black Hole Records and a lot of stuff that people always wanted mastering for EDM because a lot of my friends were doing big events and festivals, and getting that low end right for a festival, it just required a very high quality mastering to make sure that you had that low end clean. They'd go out to festivals. Sometimes plugins just couldn't always get it, or more so you needed the room, I guess, to make sure you could hear that low end, which I had in LA. Then I started doing TV commercials. I did commercials for Taco Bell, Ford, Fiat commercial. A lot of the stuff is online or on my website, which is marceljamesmastering.com. Very simple. You can go into the listen section and see some of the stuff that I'm talking about. It's posted there. Did also some work for American Idol. Did some work for Mike Posner and different LA clients. Tori Kelly. Worked with Mick Guzauski as one of my endorsers as an engineer. He loves my mastering, as well as Brian Vibberts. So just after many years, after a decade, I decided to transition. I was doing enough work where I decided to transition to do mastering full time. But can't get away from Antelope. It's really become a part of my story as well, and I'm a part of theirs because I was there from the very beginning. Antelope's history included the first oven-controlled crystal clock, the OCX, the first atomic clock used for audio. This has become the standard in film mixing on projects like Avatar, Star Wars, and really every major motion picture you go and see has been clocked by Antelope. Sean Murphy is the most famous mixing guy for film in the world, and he credits these in his seminar at Mix with the Master. He credits the Antelope clocking for a big part of the sound that they're getting for projects like Avatar. He really loves that, and a lot of mastering guys do. So it's in that Antelope clocking, unknown to most of us, is really the behind the scenes clocking most of the audio that we consume either in film or on the radio every day. And live sound, by the way, very big for live sound because it's very important to clock. Digital is such a big part of live sound that you have to clock all these systems accurately, and we're on really every major tour has some component of Antelope clocking. Stevie Wonder, Justin Timberlake, Jay-Z, Rihanna, on and on. All of this stuff's online, so you could check some of that out. Antelope was also the first. They do a lot of innovation. So they may not be the biggest name yet in interfaces, but they definitely are the biggest innovator of technologies used in interfaces, which includes effects, which we'll get to in a moment. The first 32 channel in a USB single space rack, the first 12 mic preamp interface, the first 64 channel hybrid interface, the Goliath, now the Goliath HD, and the first interface with fully discrete mic pre. So a lot of firsts. Now, the core technology for these effects, and this story is sort of evolving, but I still want to talk a little bit about FPGA because that's what I use every day, which is processing done directly. And I use a Goliath HD with a 10MX atomic clock in my mastering room, which you could see on my website. But today, these are the same effects that are in the Zen Tour and with the Discrete 4. So the demo that I'm going to do with the effects, with the same effects that I use for the mastering chain, I just load them up here inside the Zen Tour. So you can use these effects and build your own mastering chain with these, or mix chain for that matter. FPGA is the core technology. However, some of the newer devices like the Edge Go, which is actually a microphone with these effects built in, and some of our new interfaces, Generation 3 of the Orion series, features DSP chips as well. So you're going to start seeing third-party plugins start to populate that are powered or driven, run on the actual Antelope interfaces, not just the FPGA. So it's a growing platform. People are seeing it evolve. It's real time because it's on the device, or under a millisecond for the CPU stuff even. So it's very fast, it's practically real time, but really way sub-millisecond, a few samples when you're talking about the FPGA stuff, because the FPGA is always running. It's hardwired. So when I talk about hardware on the FPGA, this is hardware. These effects that I'm showing you today are hardware powered, and they're wired and mimicked exactly as the hardware would, with the same delay times, the same electron speeds inside. If you had to put a resistor inside of the hardware to build a certain effect, we'd have to build a resistor using the FPGA gates, which is a field programmable gate array. That's a chip. It's like a DSP, but it's actually replicating hardware. That's just it's very important to understand the difference when we're talking about CPU versus FPGA. All of this is online. You can research all of this in various Wikipedia and technology sites. This is not just marketing by any stretch of the imagination. It's all real technology. The main core difference that you need to realize between FPGA and CPU is FPGA is parallel processing. It's going on all the time. If I add another effect, I'm never leaving that effect. It's very important. You'll see me stacking up different effects when I'm building a chain. They're all the same architecture. So I'm not adding more code because it's always running. It's running in parallel all the time. I'm just accessing this modeled circuitry in real time on the device. And that's very cool for a mastering guy because I can add as many things as I want, on this device up to 8 different effects. And then I can output that to another stack and add 8 more and 8 more until I run out of effects. And there's no change. There's no change in sound because I'm never leaving that architecture. So you can actually get audio benefits from modeling on an FPGA as opposed to using hardware because you're not dealing with the line noise and the interconnect noise of building a signal path with multiple pieces of gear, as a lot of you guys who are from that older school, some of you here, realize that if I want to build a chain with 16 devices, there are downsides. There is a price to pay. The stack tax is what I call it. But you don't pay the stack tax here. So the benefits start to overwhelm even the hardware. It's not just me saying it. It's guys like Michael Brower, Mick Guzauski, Greg Wells. These guys all use AFX every day in their work. So I'm going to skip through some of this technology, but just quickly, that's what an FPGA layout looks like. If you zoom into the circuitry, you can see that it's interconnected. These are all circuits running in real time on the FPGA live. So these effects that we're running today are interconnected. You can see the diagram of the circuitry. It's very similar to a schematic in the sense that we have to build these electronics the same sort of way. So this is pretty much all the new interfaces now sold by Antelope feature this technology. So it's not like the old days where I had to kind of go in. So a stack looks like this, and I can scroll through them. And this is a very typical mastering chain that I use all the time. And again, it's really convenient because I can stack these up. Now, typically I'll mention another company I do use, and we're starting third party. I don't know if we're going to work with this one off the bat, but as I said, we're going to start working with other companies as well, so we're comfortable talking about other things that we use as well. I say we, again, I use Isotope plugins. I use plugins at the very beginning of the chain. But they're very specific tasks. I like their Imager plugin to sort of spread things out a little bit in a careful way because I can do it frequency independent. I like some of their exciting programs. They can add a little plugins. They can add a little energy to the sound. And I specifically use their EQ for very small notches. But those are very tiny strokes. We wouldn't even hear in here. The broader strokes, the more general sound shaping, probably 60 to 70% of my mastering chain is decided in the AFX stack. And then I have a hardware stack of multiple devices. The most the expensive one being a Soundtech mastering EQ. I also don't use plugins anymore. So once I get out of that first step of using those plugins in the DAW, I'm going to hardware either on the FX platform or then in the analog platform, converting with the 10MX Goliath HD, and that's what I call the seasoning, the special sauce at the very end. Not a lot of heavy lifting with specific frequency notches or adjustments going on in the hardware. More tonal shaping, what I call tilting, where you're bringing up the top a little, bringing up the bottom a little, shaping the bottom, reshaping the bottom, bringing out some of those mids. I really like the op amps in the Soundtech mastering EQ because they add just this sparkle. If that thing goes out, which it did one time in 12 years, the thing goes out, it's just, I can't work. I mean, because that's what people don't come to me for, the effects that they can get anywhere. That hardware chain is worth mentioning here. It is an important part of my sound construction. It's more the special sauce at the end. It's not as much reshaping and specific work that I do with the Antelope. That's really where the rubber meets the road, because the Antelope chain, sometimes it doesn't even move. You know, you do a certain high-pass filtering. I'm hitting transformers in the BAE, who is here, by the way, the guys from BAE. They make really great Neve-style stuff. They're really the most authentic Neve stuff out there. BAE is a partner of Antelope. We model their 1073 preamp and their EQ, and they make great hardware, and I use it in my mastering chain. Everything that I use mostly has either the tubes, the transformers, or the op amps on the output chain. If you start to put tubes on the input chain and a mastering chain, you're going to slow down the sound. Even the tubes that I use from Summit on the output section of my hardware, I sometimes disconnect them if I'm doing really, really fast, like rock music. I'm doing a project for Universal Music Group in Japan right now. It's really, really fast, really, really loud. I mean, we're talking about super loud. And I want to talk about loudness really quickly as well here in a moment, but because it's getting a bad rub in some circles, and there's a reason that we need modern music loud, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I'm gonna swim upstream a little bit and go against the grain of conventional wisdom that loud is bad, because for modern music, more importantly, the way that people listen to music, being on these earbuds, I'll just knock this out right now. These only go so loud. If I walk around this hall at -14, which is the streaming service protocol for how loud to make it before their algorithms kick in, which you can defeat, by the way, you're not going to hear the music in this hall on these earbuds. So the reason for loud music, and the reason kids want them, is they've been bottlenecked by the technology that they've been given in most cases, either on laptop speakers or on the earbuds. They want to crank it up. And listen, who are we to begrudge them the right to ruin their ears and have tinnitus like we all start to get when we get older? The truth is, kids like it loud, and you're not going to change that. And the question is how to make it loud without that fatigue, without that harshness. And that's where I reside. You know, I'm great doing a streaming version of -14. I do them all the time. Doesn't mean people upload them. The fact is, most of the kids go up there, say, I want my streaming, I want Spotify louder, and they turn off normalization. They turn on their ad blockers on YouTube. Probably a lot of you guys do. Who watches YouTube ads anymore? Probably very few of you, right? So the same thing applies for the streaming services. Who uses their normalization? A lot of kids just don't. The people consuming music don't. And so you got to master loud. The trick is, how do you master good? How do you master clean and loud? And I spent over a decade devising this, and the people that come to me, they come for the hardware chain, but they come for that seasoning and that competitively loud sound, but without hurting their ears, and have something that's going to stand the test of time, so you can go back in 5 years from now and play it and still feel good about it. If you go back to the stuff that's 10 years old on my website, it doesn't sound that different. It may be a little less loud, a little less this or that, but it's the general sound of the stuff I just did last month. So there's stuff online. You can go and listen to the website for that. So this is a track I did that was featured on the television show The Bay recently for an artist, Morgan O'Connor. Morgan was a model for, gosh, I'm spacing on the brand, but a very famous model with dreadlocks, and he's did, Polo was the company. Sorry, Ralph Lauren. I'm glad I remembered that. So you can look him up. But he's also a musician. So for like the last 7-8 years, he's the most famous Ralph Lauren model because he's always out in a yacht. He's a white guy with dreadlocks, and that's his shtick. But very nice guy, very good singer and musician, plays guitar. And this is a song that he did recently, and he found me through a friend I master a lot for. And this is a song called I Can't Forget. And again, it was featured on, it's not released yet, but it was featured on a television show, The Bay, recently. So first thing I'm going to do is play the mix. Turn up just a little bit. I'm going to be adjusting as we go.
I'm impressed. You got the best of me, and now my heart's in debt. Yeah, well, I regret just letting you walk away, and now I can't forget. Forget about lies and alibis, always losing you and terrified of it all.
Things that I'm going to address pretty quickly right there. We got a little essiness on the vocal. We've got some boominess on the low end. This is very typical. There's nothing wrong with this mix. It's a very good mix. Don't be afraid. If you can send me something that's shaped well on the low end, I'll be able to take it that much further in the mastering stage. If you send me something that's not SE too much, I may still de-ess some. So don't be freaked out by getting all of these details perfect. If you can do it, great. If you get a mix that sounds like that, we're all going to be really happy when it gets done because it's going to sound really, really nice at the end of the process. So the first thing I do is I'm going through, just to give you a little setup, I'm routing. Don't be scared by this routing mechanism. It's very easy. The top is from, the output is to. If I'm playing back something from my Thunderbolt play, which I am right now, I usually play out 3 and 4. Then I go directly to one of my mixer channels so that I can monitor both the play. I want to constantly monitor the before, the mix, and after. And the nice thing about going through a mixer on the FPGA is they don't sound bad, and I can lower my mastering so that I get an apples to apples. I want to level match what I'm comparing, and I want to be able to match to a reference that is also loud. So that would be not level matched. Inside the FPGA, I can do it without having to go through analog gear and more interconnects and tainting the sound anymore. So I do it all within the same architecture in these mixers. It's pretty straightforward, and you'll see me kind of jump around here a little bit as we're working. So I'm going to go back to the master. First thing I'm going to do is the link channels 1 and 2, because if I start changing them independently, one left channel obviously will change, the right channel won't. Now when I go to print, I unlink them. Personally, I just feel it sounds a little more open when you unlink the entire stack. So also, again, very typical with hardware as well. So all I have to do is then solo the first track.
Yeah. Well, I'm at the point where I don't care, and I can't find those feelings.
I pass everything. So just really quickly, this is the chain I put together.
Why does it take so long?
That's the mix that I was sent. And that's without a limiter. I'm getting good gain. So if I can get loudness in my digital chain and do some creative clipping, which is intentional, which you kind of got to be careful with, but I can do it here, then I don't have to limit as much. If I don't have to limit as much, things aren't going to sound as smashed at the end of the day. So going back to the chain, I've bypassed everything, and let's start building up the chain one at a time. So let's jump around here.
Yeah. I regret just letting you walk away, and now I can't forget.
So I have to start and stop every time I want to talk pretty much to make sure it's clear enough for the live stream. First thing I want to add is De-Esser. As I talked about, it's a little SE. You're going to see me add the De-Esser, and then I'm just going to kind of show you as we're going that I've slowed down the attack on that De-Esser a little bit so that I'm not just killing it completely, right? So it's trying to find that right balance between the threshold and the attack. Usually the frequency and the type of de-essing are the things that I play with to find a decent de-esser.
Forget about lies and alibis, always losing you and terrified.
So I'm around 33 on the threshold. I'll turn it up just so you can see it working. You see it engaging?
Well, I'm at the point where I don't care, and I can't find those feelings nowhere.
Subtle, but it's working.
Yeah.
So I'll turn it off.
Why does it take so long?
Turn it back on.
to let
You hear that?
this go and just move along? I feel
I've got
like
the attack
I'm
around
on my
4.
own either way.
See, when I turn that attack to,
And at the end of it all, my best friend turns into a
if I turn that attack too fast, I start to lose the benefits, and then I gotta turn my threshold down. So it's a careful balance between the threshold. Now, that's a pretty powerful tool. That's the best de-esser, frankly, honestly, I've ever used. I've used the DS1, I liked it, never was a huge fan of its tonal sound overall. I don't get a sound with this de-esser. It's just when I bypass it and turn it on, I'm not losing. It's not squashing the rest of the song. It's going into the frequency. Yeah, it's taming the sound, which I like, of the general track, not just the vocal. So you're getting that benefits of the de-esser, not just on the vocal, but on the entire track, but does it in a nice way, and I really like it. That alone is worth the price of admission for a mastering guy. A mastering guy will spend $10,000 to get that kind of a de-essing right there. Anyone that's tried to do it, I will vouch for that. So the next thing in the chain I'm going to add is a little EQ. So what I like to do with the vocals, and I'll do this almost every time in the mid-range, is a little reshaping. So the mix is good on its own, as we said. But when you start to turn these things up loud, one frequency may be a little too strong than the next. And it's again, this loudness game we talked about earlier on, that's why that was so important. Loudness is like the exposure. And that's why it's gotten a bad rap in a lot of sectors. Okay, yeah, it's less dynamics. You know, I do things that have punch. I try not to use the compression too much so we maintain punch, right? But the other problem is if the mid-frequency are a little bit shouty at a normal listening level of the mix, they're going to be screaming at you by the time you turn it up loud. So what I'd like to do is find that frequency that's shouty on whatever track it is. It's always usually something, and I tame that down with a Pultec EQ, Pultec model, Pultec style model, and then I bring up some other ones to sort of offset it, the ones that I like. So let's take a look at that right now. You hear that mid-range? Feel it just shift right away? Turn it off. Right? And some of this will make more sense as we build, because I'm not super, super loud right now. So that may sound a lot, oh, well, it's not as exciting. Yeah, but wait, because when it gets louder, it's really going to matter. So what I did was here mostly, and it doesn't take much. With mastering, a little goes a long way. I cut less than a dB at 4K, and then I'm boosting 3. It's not always those frequencies. It can be 2. It can be 7. It's 6. Well, no, it could be 5 or 7. You just don't know. It just depends on the mix. It depends on the voice, depends on the track, depends on the mix. So you just kind of go around and look at it and kind of move the frequencies and find the one that makes the most sense. So without getting too and along those same lines, this is the Lang EQ. Lang EQ I'm very close to all these effects, but the Lang EQ actually did the measurements. I borrowed 2 Langs from Eldorado Studio in Burbank, took them back to my studio, did all the sweep measurements, sent them back to Antelope. So I was very close to this, had the gear in my hands, connected them myself, and actually recorded the sweeps of these things. So I heard them, and I heard the model. And I can tell you, Mick Guzauski runs every mix he's doing through these Lang EQs. Greg Wells loves them. They are Langs. They sound just like the hardware. They're incredible. Without having to find 2 mono Langs that you can get to match, which is nearly impossible. These are stereo Langs that actually match and are recallable. So let's listen to what I'm doing with the Langs. Take a look visually. The low end is very important. Very important. Every master, almost every master I get, the frequencies sometimes change, but I de-emphasize the 50 and I bring up the 60. So it's a boost cut. It's Pultec style, but it's solid state. And I do that, definitely keep an eye on my time here. I think we got 6 more minutes. So I de-emphasize that So again, when we're getting it super loud, we don't want to be too boomy, but we don't want to lose our sub energy. And for my chain, and everybody is going to have a little bit different hardware chain, it's going to interact a little differently, but since I have transformers in my hardware chain, which also have some beef to them, I like this approach. Doesn't mean I still do go down to 30. I go down and work in the 20, 30 range. You need to, like as I said, when you're working with products that are going to go out there on huge 18-inch subwoofers and bigger, you're definitely gonna need to work in that sub range, get a nice measured flat room, get a good sub response in your room, and that's the advantage of a mastering engineer. Not every room is going to have the bass traps that you're going to need and the treatments that you're going to need to hear down there accurately to make those distinguishes, those decisions. But this is really a great trick. And the other thing that I do is because I've somewhat de-essed, it gives me room to give some nice 10. So taking that top end down, like I said, things make more sense in context, the entire chain, but taking some of that high-end energy away in the 6 to 7K range allows me to boost with a moderately loud bandwidth centered around 10K, so I can bring back some nice top end, which you'll hear as well. I also almost always shape, and this is a great trick for loudness to keep things from being smooth, that it took me a long time to, filtering is a huge important thing for mastering, and I think for mixing too. It's one of the easiest tricks you can do. Besides reshaping that mid-range I talked about, is once I'm boosting that 10, it allows me go down with this filter to 2.5K, and I can bring that down gently, not as much. The knob's not nearly hit as hard, but it takes the edge off in that upper mid-range to high end. And then you hear these radio tracks come on, you know, that are like, they don't sound like they're missing, but it sounds like all the mids and the top end are all pushed down, because that's what's happening. Whether it's the choice of gear or they're using a specific filter to do it, that's what the result is. I know, I've listened to it, I measured it. So, Spider-Man track is one that comes to mind, Sunflower. You listen to that, it sounds good, it sounds great on the radio. You listen to it in the studio, it's like, what did they do to the mids to bring that way down? It gives them room, gives them headroom to work in that range so that they're not ripping your head off with the vocal. So let's listen to that. Kick in a little bit here. There's the lane. You felt the bass shift right away. Turn it off. Tubbier. The low end is still there. I've still got my sub energy. I'm going to extremes on that shelf, okay? Just gentle, just enough, okay? Now this is next one. I love this trick. It's pretty recent. It's the Impressor, which is modeled after the Distressor. The Impressor is amazing for mastering, mixing tracks. You're gonna look, I'm not even hitting the compression on it necessarily, but it's still doing its thing because the circuitry is modeled so well that it sounds just better. As soon as you bring it in, it gives this sort of radio energy. So let's listen to the Impressor now, next. I'm at the point where I don't care, and I can't find those feelings nowhere. Right away, I've got that nice sheen, it's controlled, it's still punchy. Why does it take so long to let this go and just move along? I feel like I'm... Next in the chain is the 4K Black, which is an SSL style EQ. I don't do a ton here, but I like to bring up some 1K. On most masters, I'm usually doing something around 1 to 2K as well. We're not just working in mids, highs, and lows here. And what I try to do is bring in a little nice 1K body with a pretty wide, fairly wide Q. And it's around medium, around 1. And then I also I'm going to bring a little more of that edge off at 4.5. I don't like to do too much cutting with one EQ. So I'll do some with the 4K here as well, and then we'll get to the last one, which is the Altec, which I really love. A little more edge off on the vocal again. And feel that 1K? Well, I'm at the point where I don't care. Some of the body goes away. Now I got a little more warmth down there. It's nice. Feels good, like a Coke.
Why does it take so long?
And again, everything's going to make more sense in context. I'm going to need to turn down now. I'm clipping the output stage of this next compressor. The tube compressors in the Antelope AFX, you can hit them pretty hot. They're modeled to clip in an analog manner. This is a really nice trick. So I'm going to come in and I'll give you that Altec now. Turn down a little bit.
Why does it take so long?
Now everything makes a lot more sense, right? Because now I got my gain.
I feel like I'm on my own either way.
And that's about 70%. It's close. I can put a limiter, I can print that. It's not going to clip inside the DAW. It's going to sound like that. So I can print that at a limiter, and we basically got a master. We just don't have the analog chain, right? Now I'm going to turn off a couple things in context, and you'll hear what they're actually doing in that chain a lot better. And that's just the Pultec. Isn't that nice? The Lang.
You got the best of me, and now my heart's dead. Yeah.
So that's just the Lang, the Pultec. In context, they're doing a lot more than you thought as you're building these. Now, you know, I didn't just get lucky. I've been doing that. I do that every day, and I know just the amounts to do. So I was able to throw this chain together pretty quickly last night to prepare for you. But a little goes a long way. Think individually when you're building your effects change, whether it's AFX or whatever it is, everything needs to stand on its own, but then think collectively how that chain's going to build as you go. Build your whole chain, turn each thing. You may find, and I do this a lot, that you just want to eliminate one of those steps altogether because it isn't, in the end of the day, collectively, it didn't bring you forward. So don't feel like you have to use every tool in your arsenal at everything you're doing, because it's not always true. You know, sometimes I get by with 6, 7 things collectively, talking about hardware, plugins, everything, and sometimes it's 15. Just depends on the track. Doesn't mean it's a bad mix, it's just that that mix was able to benefit from a bunch of different things doing a little. I tend not to do too much other than that Altec, which is a cool trick. But I don't always boost that much gain because I get gain from my analog chain. I did that for effect here. I don't always go into the red. Matter of fact, excuse me, I rarely go into the red on that Altec at the end. And I don't always use the Altec. Sometimes a BA6A, sometimes it's some of those other tube compressors as well. I know we have a little time for questions. I kind of went over. Are we still good? Do we have any overrun time, or are we done, guys? We're waiting for our microphone to come on. If we have some questions, I'm happy to answer some questions.
So we are actually at the end. If you want to, if you have some question, you can ask them now.
Everyone's always nervous asking group questions. It's never does. Go ahead.
How do you print those effects in your chain? Now, because it's in the mixer, right?
Yeah, I'm routed. I do it all here in this routing scheme. So, okay, I'm going to a hardware limiter, so I'm going to print that too. So I'm not going to, when I print, I'm done. Unless I have to do a sample rate conversion, and I don't like printing to a second rig typically. I do like going to the same rig I'm playing back on at the same rate, and then do a sample rate conversion. I like to use Studio One. I like to use some of the isotope stuff. I just go on both ways. I know some people have a print and playback rig. I found for me, and plus I have to deliver a lot of different formats. There's some convenience, but I like the sound of getting that capture right and then converting that. So I do just, you see my input stage right here where it says Thunderbolt record 1 and 2. I've got the AFX output chain on this chain going right here to 1 and 2. So I can activate that, hit record, and I'm printing. And that's similar, it's the same process essentially to what I'm doing in my full mastering rig. Any other questions, guys? Don't be shy. This is fun stuff here. Nobody's on the spot here. It's all good. It's just music.
How are you long still here? So maybe for some other questions in the next hours. How long are you here?
Yes. I am here. I'll mostly be around the Antelope booth, which is straight on the other side of that giant Atom Hall. You'll see the Antelope booth. You'll see all this gear we talked about. I'm there. And I'll hang around here a little bit after as well if anyone has any one-on-one questions or you want a business card. Keine Angst. Ich weiß nicht. Nicht so doll. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Dankeschön.